Hello, you're very welcome along to week 6 of the NFL Matchbook podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined by the trio of Drew Dinsick, Judah, and Sam Farley, straight off a 2-1 best bets this weekend. So look, Sam, you got there, you took a chance on the Dolphins covering, fair play to you, but a little bit to the listeners, reflection on that obviously, but also the London game and the atmosphere at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. As an Arsenal fan myself, it's tough to say that that stadium is a proper sports stadium, and when the NFL's in town, there seems to generate a serious atmosphere amongst the NFL fans.
Yeah, I think it's an old trope by now, but Wembley doesn't have a huge amount of atmosphere, and the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium it's sort of purpose built. The way they built it in terms of in terms of the audio, they kind of want every sort of cheer to be louder and louder. It's really designed with the audience in mind, which it's fantastic, and that's the way it really should be in these modern stadiums. But I mean, that game in London was last year. I think it was the Packers. I think it's Packers Giants. Was one hell of an atmosphere, and that felt like a real step forward into being a kind of more traditional American atmosphere, because generally it's kind of you see all 32 jerseys, and don't get me wrong, you still do get that, but it really felt like there was a home team in that Packers game. And this week with the Bills, it was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I think half of Buffalo must have been there. There are so many Americans, and yeah, it was really interesting the way you could kind of tell who were the Americans and who was the Brits over there. If they had sort of traditional kind of stuff that you get from Fanatics, they're probably Brits. If they've got homemade sort of dungarees covered in blue and white, they're probably from Buffalo. And when I think about 3/4 of the way through, they did a karaoke thing of "Don't Look Back in Anger," and when you saw who wasn't singing that, you knew they must be American as well. So, all crazy atmosphere. Really enjoyed it, and it's almost got me looking forward to the Ravens Titans game this week.
Yeah. Well, we got to drum that up as best we can. It'll be the first game we cover on the podcast, Sam. Yeah, saw the votes for "Don't Look Back in Anger." My apologies to American viewers who are unaware of Oasis' great UK band, and hopefully they will get back together one day. Drew, take it away on the London game. You did a great week yourself. Any sort of takeaways for us? But in general, we got a couple of comments saying, "Oh, Drew seems like fed up talking about the NFL," and then as you talk for 10 minutes passionately about it. But I sort of see where they're coming from as well. So, how's the NFL season for you so far?
I mean, it's been 5 winning weeks, so I can't complain. Last week's sides were incredible for me, but I'm kind of reflecting on how I've performed, and it's been pretty lucky. I think a lot of people have to kind of reflect who have won so far this season, that they, unless there just hasn't been many right sides that, have come through. And I think in particular, there's been clear, misallocation in some spots. But I got lucky last week. The Jags game was awesome. That was in my opinion, that's the most consequential game in terms of like championship equity we've had so far, because of the losses that the Bills sustained on defense. Bills defense was playing as a top 5 unit, and now in the absence of Matt Milano, and also, by the way, Daquan Jones and Trey White, like those are those are major losses at every level for that defense, and they came in as one of the deeper units, so maybe they backfilled just fine. But I have a really, really tough time seeing that they're going to be able to patch things on the fly. Now they have a pretty soft kind of 2 games here against the Giants and the Patriots to get right. But I think once they get into the kind of business end of the season, they're going to really feel those losses pretty substantially. And then on the flip side, the Jags getting that win, what teams are going to play who before the season, before you even see the schedule. Like, it's all predetermined. And we knew that the Jags were at the Bills. The fact that game took place in London, with the Jags having a massive travel advantage, is still mind-blowing to me. Don't know how that, do we have AI to thank for this? I saw like 10 commercials about how AI was responsible for the schedule last weekend for some reason. But that was a horrific thing for the Bills championship equity, and pretty positive for the Jags. I think the other kind of major swing in terms of championship equity was obviously the Niners Cowboys game, and we'll get to the Cowboys in a little bit later. I'll save some of my thoughts, but pretty clearly now the Niners are, pole position for the 1 seed in the NFC. With that comes, a ton of equity in the championship market. So Difficult question this week, whether you want to try to sell a little bit high on them, considering the matchup and the conditions. But we'll get to that as well.
Okay. A lot of interest. And look, props to you, Drew. You said on week 1 about the Jags future markets, that Bills game and the doubleheader the Jags had in London, definitely unfairly for sure. And I think people didn't realize the effect of that until obviously Sunday afternoon. And the Giants, you mentioned Giants and Patriots as a doubleheader for the Bills to get back on track was a big part of Cowboys' early start as well. So we'll get into all that. Judah, your takeaways from last week and in general over the last few weeks. We feel like the season's building up again, and the same sort of topics about that NFC versus AFC debate, who will ultimately get through to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, Judah's muted.
Yeah, we'll get Judah back in again. Yeah, I think you're muted there, Judah. If you want to come back in, or maybe we'll get Judah's thoughts.
I can vamp a little more while we wait for him to come back. But yeah, I mean, the kind of thoughts I had about sort of luck determining things. Won a bet on the Steelers last week that I had no business winning. The Falcons Texans game was a wild one, obviously, and I ended up staking the Chiefs pretty aggressively at 3.5. And boy, did that feel lucky ultimately. I don't think I've ever seen the refs pick up a flag of that consequence at the end of a game. And, Vikings probably punch it in for a touchdown and then the Chiefs win by 3 and I lose my bet. So, yeah, it's, those small things you won't, if you have a positive book at the end of the season, maybe you don't even realize how much those will matter. But that one was pretty lucky for me. Yeah.
We've seen there wasn't the only wild decision over the weekend. Judah, come back in.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I guess for me now.
Yeah,
good.
Clear signal.
I was just gonna say, I feel like we're really in the swing of the season where we've kind of already had the ups and downs. It was like we're all ready to crown the Dolphins, like, oh, this new team. And they lost to the Bills. They kind of faded. The Bills rose. They lost. Now it's kind of like, okay, who's the kind of team in the NFC? And I think it just serves as a reminder of this is a long season. There are going to be lots of kind of ups and downs, and I would never kind of hold to one particular week or one particular matchup and say, oh, this is going to kind of hold forth throughout the season. Random things happen. This is a long season, and we're just in the beginning of it.
Well said, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into these games. It just seems every week it's getting a little bit more important as the weeks go on. Ravens, Titans, Seahawks, Bengals, Lions at Bucs, Cowboys at the Chargers. We see a lot of people betting on the matchup betting exchange. You can do your accumulators there if you want to get a red zone, but particularly if you want to have your big singles and the liquidity in the markets, particularly a couple hours off kickoff, price will be inevitably best price in the odds checker grid on both sides of the ball there, depending which way you're going to play on any sort of point spread. So do check that out every Sunday on the matchup betting exchange. And let's get straight into it. Ravens at Titans, the London game. We're going to get Sam to build this up for us, but we're going to take a look at the betting first that we have on matchbook.com. The Ravens are 1.5 favorites, Titans underdogs at 286. The point spread sees Ravens laying 4.5, and the total currently stands at 41.0 as we record on Wednesday afternoon. So Sam, take it away. Look, seen a lot of talk about Lamar Jackson on various platforms. For me, look, watching the game, it just seemed a lot of his receivers kept dropping the ball. So there's only so much Lamar can do.
Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about Lamar. I still think he's the man. I love what he does, and I love what he can offer the Baltimore offense. I think this is it's a really interesting game actually, because you've obviously got the Ravens who the ground game, it's their entire identity, and then you have the Titans who seemingly are going through a bit of a midlife crisis almost. They're sort of abandoning what has been a relatively successful identity for them in recent years and trying to be a bit more diverse. I think we've only really seen kind of one sort of King Derrick Henry week this season. It feels like potentially he's a fading force. Tajay Spears doing really well and perhaps offering more in the receiving game there. So that's potentially swaying their decision. But ultimately, these are two teams that very good at stopping the run. I think Ravens are 7th in terms of the least amount of yardage on the ground per game, with the Titans 9th. Ravens very good on the ground, 4th in terms of yardage on offense in rushing yards. And Titans, obviously mid-table down to that kind of, I guess, decision to move away from the run a bit. But if this is a really tough one, because I think if this was in the US and the Titans really did have home field advantage, I would be taking the Titans here. But I'm actually going for the Ravens on the money line. I'm being a bit of a coward and taking the smaller price, purely because of what we saw last weekend with the Bills kind of suffering in comparison with the Jags, who were over here and had acclimatized a lot easier. So the Ravens departed Baltimore on Monday morning, whereas the Titans fly out Thursday night, which is the same as the Bills did last week. And I really do think that could tell, because that game last weekend of the first of the Sunday, the London game, I really did think it took them Bills about half to really look like they were awake. And I know it's probably not quite as simple as blaming everything on jet lag, because I think the Jags did a lot of things really right that day. But I just have to believe there is some sort of serious kind of difference here. And the Ravens coming over on Monday morning, that tells me that it is. And this is a team that they've been here before. Last time was, must have been 5-6 years ago, I think. I think they played the Jags here. They lost that game to the Jags. I think Mercedes Lewis got a couple of TDs. I think they've learned from that experience. Coming here late then was not potentially a good idea. And they've kind of decided to make the early move here this week to kind of beat that jet lag and acclimatize a bit earlier. So I really do think there's something in this. So I just have to take the Ravens money line. I'm not brave enough to take the points.
Okay, so one that is leaning towards potentially taking the points. Drew, a little bit on the different travel times there, and then your thoughts over on this game going into
I'll try to save Sam some coin here. If that's your angle, first half is even cheaper. I think in general, that's where you would see some sort of lag effect, right? The idea that the Titans maybe have a little bit of a slow start, not crazy. And, I think the market is telling you the Ravens are the right side here. This got down to 3 before. It's been basically one-way action, pushing this out to, as you can see on Matchbook right now, 4.5. That is sort of leading the market at this point on Ravens. And I get it. I agree with that. I think it's funny to me that the entire offseason, a lot of the kind of postulating and, thinking about the Ravens with, new offensive system. And, they got all these weapons, and it's felt like very much the same old. When it doesn't go well, it's like the same problems. And I will kind of try to cut through some of the thoughts on, say, at least what they're trying to do, and some of the aggressive passing that is in the playbook does feel different to me than what we saw from Greg Roman. And I think that actually gives me higher expectation that as we get to the later portions of the season, the Ravens offense will get there in terms of what was conceived, right? That may start this week, actually, because the Titans in general are a team that lends itself to be passed against, but some of that is because they lend themselves not to be run against. And I think what you've seen from the Baltimore Ravens running scheme has been pretty solid. Justice Hill, I thought, had a lot of pop in that Steelers game before he fumbled and then just kind of wasn't utilized as often. Lamar Jackson, for what it's worth, tends not to run as often against the Steelers, which is part of the handicap of getting points to go against him in that spot. I think he'll be more inclined to run in this game. And I think in general, the receivers, with all the focus on their performance last week, having a bounce back week wouldn't shock me. So this is basically Ravens or pass. And if you really want to play that angle about the disparity in travel, which I think is real, then I think first half is a fun way to isolate that specifically.
Okay, perhaps looking at the first half on the Ravens, it's a lean from Drew, not necessarily a bet on the Ravens here. And something we haven't spoken about yet is the total, Judah, which is currently 41.0, was 41.5. And you're looking at the under currently, or what? You were looking at the under around 41.5, and I presume similar at 41.0.
Yeah, I just think this is an overrated Ravens offense, which I think is most of the handicap. And I'd say I'd probably lean towards Tennessee at 4.5 also. By my numbers, I have them as like a 30th percentile offense. And I'm more willing to believe that there was a lot of, as Drew was talking about, kind of this offseason postulating, where I think the main difference has been the offensive line, which has not played as well. And I think that's actually directly scheme related. Also is an effect of Lamar Jackson having fewer design rushes. Teams are respecting or not respecting the running game as much Linebackers aren't committing in the same way that they were in the past. And I think that's directly a function of leaving Greg Roman's scheme. And I look at this Ravens offense and I don't exactly see what's going to change. I mean, Nelson Aguilar is not my idea of a wide receiver you want to be relying on for a ton of production for a top offense, which I think the market is kind of pricing them at. That's a huge red flag to me. Yes, there've been plenty of drops, and those things are noisy and tend to even out over time. But there's so much deference being given to the Ravens right now. The market's probably pricing us as like the 7th best team, and they just haven't produced as such. I have the Titans as a better offense by my numbers, and I think I was certainly wrong on DeAndre Hopkins. I thought he had nothing left in the tank. Obviously, he has something left. You don't have 140 yards by accident. I don't think. This is it. Also, I want to be attacking teams with Ryan Tannehill who don't have kind of ferocious pass rushes. The Ravens are middle of the pack when it comes to quick pressure rate, things of that sort. Their secondary does not worry me at all. I think they have a terrific defensive coordinator who can kind of scheme and keep the Ravens defense afloat, but I don't think they've really been tested. Not to say I think this is a great spot for the Titans, but it does all lead me to the under, which I think this is a game of kind of two well below average offenses playing in London where there's sure to be some rust. And I would say 4.5 is just too much points. Too many points considering how well the Ravens have played, and considering I think a lot of it is sticky, considering all of the offseason kind of worries are starting to come to fruition, I think.
Okay, so it's a lean for Titans at 4.5, but Judah's playing the under 41.5. 41.0 currently is 191 on Matchbook. Ravens money line for Sam and lean towards Ravens -4.5 for Drew. We'll go to the second game here. We're going to cover the Seahawks at the Bengals. Two teams we haven't, particularly the Seahawks, we haven't had a chance to speak much about on the podcast this year, at least in the main areas. So we'll take a look at the betting. Seahawks underdogs here, 232. Bengals 1.71. The point spread sees Seahawks getting a 2.5 head start at just above even money, 2.04. And the total is 44.5. That's gone a little bit down the last hour or so. Was 45.5. So, Judah, we'll go back to you on this one. Particularly the Bengals, it's tough to really decide where they are for the last 5 weeks. I mean, like, this was a Super Bowl team in the making, you thought, heading into the season, and it just hasn't happened for them, and very inconsistent. Are they a tough team to get a read on right now, or have you sort of, after last week's performance, maybe push them up a little bit more back to where they perhaps were at preseason level?
Yeah, it's interesting to me, the kind of huge red flag with the Bengals offense, especially coming into last week, and why I was on the Cardinals last week, was that Joe Burrow's time to throw before last week was like 2.2 seconds, 2.3 seconds, which is by far the quickest in the NFL. And that does not exactly allow your receivers time to get open. He also, I thought, probably in the back of his mind, he knows he can't extend plays, which is an area he's excelled at in the past. Last week, that time to throw was about, 2.6, 2.7 seconds. And all of a sudden, the explosive offense came back for them. Whether it's Joe Burrow's calf, whatever it is, that's kind of the angle I'm looking to play more so than any of the kind of like production metrics, which is like, are they running a similar style offense to what they did in previous years as opposed to early this season? And that's what's ultimately going to lead me to having this as a live bet. I don't know if that was a 1 week kind of matchup particular thing. The market's really, I think, coming back to the side of, the Bengals are a top 10 team again. Last week, it was kind of playing that middle ground. And I'm almost there, but I'm not fully there. I think I lean towards the Bengals are coming back. I don't think, despite the Seahawks having 11 sacks against the Giants, I think that says more about the Giants offensive line than it does the Seahawks defensive line. This is, if there were a unit if there were a spot for Joe Burrow to have a bunch of time and get back to that, 2.7 time to throw, let his receivers get open sort of thing, this would be the spot. All of that's kind of having me lean towards the Bengals, but I'd rather just pay for, the information in the first couple of quarters. Are they holding onto the ball for a decent number of time? Are they able to attack downfield? And if so, I'll back the Bengals live, but it's not something I'm fully committed to doing before the game when we just don't have the full information available.
Okay, perhaps in play on the Matchup Betting Exchange during that opening window on Red Zone, perhaps looking at the time Joe Burrow gets in the pocket and maybe paying that little extra, but getting with the more information as Judah touched on. Your thoughts on that, Sam? And are the Bengals back after that performance last week against the Cardinals?
Definitely too early to say they're back, but I would lean to thinking that they are back. And I think my thinking for this game is very much the same as Judah's, but I'm happy to kind of lay the money down now. I think he just looked far, far healthier than he has at any point this season. obviously there's a couple of real high points for him and the offensive line as well. But there was that was it 63 yards touchdown pass to Chase, where he could have read a whole novel in the time the offensive line were kind of blocking. It was really, really good to see some good blocking there for once. And then more importantly, I think the most exciting part as somebody who wants to bet on the Bengals and win some cash is the 10-yard run in the second half to get the first down was really, really good. He looked mobile, he looked quick, and I'm sure he isn't 100% yet, but I saw enough in that game to have an element of confidence that the calf is certainly getting a lot better. And in which case, if we're to assume that the calf is a lot better, then Bengals -2.5 is printing money, I'd say. So really like the look of that. And yeah, he just looked far improved. And I think it's a very simple way to look at things, but I think that's probably the best way to look at things when you have somebody coming off an injury like that.
Yeah, Bengals -2.5, especially if Joe Burrow's moving well, could seem quite big come 9-10 o'clock UK time after this game. Drew, you've had your doubts, and if it was up to you a few weeks ago, you would have given him a few weeks off. He hasn't had that chance to get a few weeks off, but is it the case that he can gradually, at a slower rate, get healthier and healthier to maybe get this Bengals team back? And what were your thoughts on last week's performance?
Yeah, no, I think assuming he can avoid re-injury, that's kind of the major question at this point. Then I think, he'll get healthier, and you'll see the Bengals offense kind of regain the preseason expectation. But I've watched that game twice now, trying to get a read on exactly what Burrow was doing, and to me, it still doesn't look perfectly healthy. It's more of like he's finding ways to play around it. Like some of his deeper balls, you saw him hopping into throws off of his front foot. The deep ball to Chase in particular was interesting because like it just didn't look like a normal throw at all. And you're like, what was happening here? And then you rewind it, like, oh yeah, okay, he's almost entirely staying off of his injured calf in launching that ball. But he's been throwing the ball 50 times a week, and he's obviously finding ways to kind of work around it, which I think is, to his credit. That said, the Seahawks coverage unit is pretty good now that Witherspoon's integrated, and they have Witherspoon and Woolen out there. This is a unit that I don't think you're going to see Jamar Chase have as much space. He's going to have to find a little bit. He can't just be, I'm going to hit that area of the field and let Chase do the rest. He's going to have to be a little bit more precise on top of being able to attack down the field. If this is, what we've seen from Burrow has been an evolution of only trying the short stuff, and then anything down the field looked like it was just a throwaway that was designed to, keep people honest, right? Well, now last week was proof that, they can make completions down the field, and now you got to respect that. Okay. Well, I think the secondary for the Seahawks is strong enough to be able to match that. I like some of the Seahawks kind of exotic blitz looks they brought against the Giants, and I would expect that they try to integrate that again, because Seahawks are not getting pressure in this game unless they blitz. And they know that. And I don't think they can exactly. Maybe they think they can afford to let Joe Burrow have 2.7 seconds per drop back, but I wouldn't let him if that was my choice. So I think it kind of comes down to how do the linebackers, how does the secondary perform here for the Seahawks in terms of keeping the Bengals in the 20-point range, and then the flip side of the coin, Lou Anarumo against quarterback and Geno Smith, who I think is very, very schemable against, is pretty exciting. I'm expecting that Chidobe Awuzie is back for in the secondary for the Bengals. He matters a ton because he can absolutely cover DK Metcalf, and I think that also knocks everybody else in the secondary down a peg to where their assignments are a little bit more, a little bit more achievable. And in general, I just think that the Bengals defense is coming together well and can definitely create pressure against a Seahawks offensive line that is still struggling with massive injuries. So we haven't really seen anyone to this point take advantage of that. This looks like a game and a matchup where the D-line will be able to take advantage of that. So expecting that the front four for the Bengals are going to win their 1v1s. Expecting that in general, the secondary for the Seahawks is going to keep this game from getting away from them, which leads me directly into an under 45.5 here. You say it seems like Matchbook is leading the way back down. This total has gotten bet up, I think, on people kind of assuming that Burrow was back given his production last week. And I get that, but I think the matchups here both lend themselves to the defenses overperforming a little bit. And, that this entirely, sidesteps the idea that there may be weather in this game. So I think ultimately this is, and we haven't even talked about the running games of either of these teams. They're both kind of a slog right now, particularly Cincinnati's. So, if this turns into a game where you have to get it done on the ground, then, best of luck. And I think the under is the play.
Okay. Yeah. Under 45.5 on Matchbook is still 188. So still a backable price for Drew. So we'll lock that in, as well as the Bengals -2.5, which is currently 187, around the same price. And Judah is going to do a bit of a live bet thing, looking at the red zone or looking at the game overall, and maybe perhaps taking a bit of Bengals if he is getting time in the pocket. Burrow, that is. We'll go to the third game, which is Lions at the Bucs, 9 UK time. And this is a fun game as we build it here in the WhatsApp group early in the week. We'll take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. Lions 1.6 at the Bucs 2.54 underdogs here at home. The point spread sees Bucs getting 3-point head start, and the total for this is 44.0. So Drew, I'll start with you. And I'm like, both these teams have been sort of fun to watch. 4-1, 4-1, sorry, the Lions, and 3-1 the Bucs so far this season.
Yeah, Bucs more surprisingly than the Lions. I guess you can give the Lions pretty solid credit. They had two prove it games this year, one against the Chiefs, one against the Packers, and they proved it convincingly, I think, that they belong in the conversation. Their remaining schedule is fairly easy. They have shortened in the NFC market into the tune of about 7-1, which I think is correct. This Lions team looks like a team that's going to win the NFC North fairly comfortably and get a 1 or a 2 seed. I would expect that 1 seed is going to require Niners coming back to them a little bit, but a 2 seed is kind of there for the taking, because both the Cowboys, number one, they're maybe not as good as we thought, and we'll get there in a second, but the Eagles certainly have a schedule hell coming up through the month of November into December. So this is a pretty awesome opportunity for the Lions to get some home games in the playoffs this year, and maybe a very favorable matchup against a 7 seed in the first round, or even a pass through to the second round of the playoffs. And I think this is the kind of game that they have to win to actually realize that type of goal. The Bucs have been the more surprising team at 3-1 so far. They're coming off a bye, obviously, and they're relatively healthy. It looks like basically everyone that you had circled to keep an eye on for among the Bucs who matters are going to be available for this game. Jamel Dean's been practicing. Carlton Davis is back. That 1-2 combination of cornerbacks matters a ton, because it looks like Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to go. Mike Evans seems like he's going to play. Kalaya Cansey, who we haven't seen a ton of this season, looks like he's going to go as well. So these are basically 2 full-strength teams, both with designs to make the playoffs, and it's going to be a very good game. My general read on what has been sort of the key to success for the Lions this year has been the innovative scheming by Ben Johnson. He's probably been maybe the best offensive coordinator in football through 5 weeks of the season. He's you have coaches like Shanahan, obviously, who are doing it at the head coaching level, but what Ben Johnson is doing in terms of scheming and play calling is awesome. And the weapons he has to work with are outstanding. Jared Goff is getting tons of protection behind an elite offensive line, and he's picking apart defenses. And I think that kind of confidence alone, against a Bucs defense that likes to blitz, I think spells trouble for Tampa. I'm watching this market to see if we hit a flat 3 right now. 3 has a pretty healthy amount of juice on it, and it seems to be trending in the direction of the Bucs. If ultimately this gets to a flat 3, then I'm all in on Lions. I think the Lions, I haven't even mentioned their defense. That's maybe the one unit that's not at full strength here. They lose Emmanuel Mosley. Brian Branch is still a question mark, although I think he goes. But their pass rush has been outstanding. Aiden Hutchinson's playing at a top 3 defensive player level. Alan McNeil, who is a total bust through a couple of years, is all of a sudden generating interior pressure, and that definitely could be the distinguishing factor against an offensive line that even at full strength is not very good for Tampa. So this is Lions or pass, and I think you just need to try to target best price.
Okay, yeah, we're very close to that flat 3, if not there already at 188 -3. And Judah, you are on board fully with what Drew was saying. The Lions have been. Look, I know a couple of Lions fans, so they're they're getting rather excited about this year, especially the start form one.
Yeah, I think I have the Bucs as by far the biggest overachievers through 4 weeks from like kind of fundamentals level. I have them as a bottom.
More than the Steelers?
More than the Steelers. Pretty shocking.
True Steelers.
The Steelers have 3 wins and they should be 0-5. So I'm not sure anyone can overachieve more than that.
That's fair enough. Maybe the Steelers are up there too. The NFC, the biggest NFC overachiever is certainly
stick to your guns, man. Stick to your guns.
No. Drew's right. The Steelers are a bigger overachiever. I almost forget they're 3-2 because in my head they're like 1-4. But the Bucs I have as a bottom 7 offensive unit, similarly priced on the defensive side. And what I think is kind of critical here is that Baker Mayfield is also overachieving in some pretty key areas, namely how he's played under pressure. Baker Mayfield has a pressure to sack rate, essentially how often you take a sack when you are pressured, like 20 points below his career average, which is, I think, going to regress. It's also not a coincidence that his play under pressure, which is generally a more unstable area of play, has been atop the NFL. I don't expect that to continue. There's nothing about his traits. If you look at how he's scrambling, if you look at his time to throw, all of these sorts of indicators that would feed into being able to play under pressure well. It's not a coincidence that Patrick Mahomes is going to be the best under pressure. He has an incredible sack avoidance. That's not true of Baker Mayfield. I think all of that is going to regress. And with that said, with Baker Mayfield still playing at a terrific level under pressure, the Bucs are still underperforming by my numbers, which I think is a huge sell signal. I'd also say that at the current price of -3, I think there's some kind of like, okay, the Bucs are coming off a bye. But as Drew mentioned, I think a lot of the advantage of coming off a bye is that your players are healthy, and when the other team's not coming off a bye, their players aren't healthy. But I think the Lions are actually relatively healthy. So if you're kind of taking like a generalized view of, oh, let's add a certain boost towards the bye, and that built into that price is the sort of injury, I don't think that applies in this current spot. I just have this as such a huge mismatch by my numbers. I think the bye advantages are mitigated. And I would just echo what Drew said. There's a huge mismatch on the interior. Aiden Hutchinson has been lining up as a defensive lineman for most of his snaps. He's been among the best players in the NFL. Tristan Wirfs is terrific at left tackle, but the rest of the Tampa Bay O-line is a bunch of weak links. And I just see that at some point this pressure is going to catch up to Mayfield. And this is exactly the type of matchup which it will catch up to him.
Okay, yeah, 188 Lions -3, agreement with Drew and Judah. Something we haven't really spoken about, Sam. The total it's kind of crept up to 44.0, but you can still get 188 on Matchbook and over 43.5, and that's where you're playing here.
Yeah, I'm going to go slightly under, take that 43.5. I just think when you look at this, there's kind of two teams that are, well, the Lions are doing exceptionally well on offense, 29.6 points per game, 4th highest in the league, and the Bucs are 21.4. And yeah, I think kind of what you said, Jude, is right about Baker Mayfield. I think we are going to see regression. I think there's no way we won't see that, given how many years in are we on his career now? 6, whatever it is. Must be 6 actually. But yeah, I just don't. At the same time, I don't think he's going to regress to being absolutely awful, because I think the Bucs are potentially doing some things to kind of help mitigate his own weaknesses, and ultimately, I think he's just being a lot kind of safer with the ball than we've seen in the past. And I know a lot of that is down to how he's kind of worked under pressure. But I do think he's good enough to be a starter in this league. Not necessarily good enough to take a team anywhere near where they want to be, but he is good enough to kind of get teams through games. And I think, yeah, basically I'm going to tack the total here, because I think we're going to get a couple of scores from the Bucs, probably not as much as the 21.4 they've been averaging. But I think we're going to see the Lions go pretty nuclear, to be honest, and kind of get, well, yeah, I think we're going to get at least 30, 35 points from them. So that's basically my thinking here. Obviously, kind of in that explanation, that kind of ties up to the fact I think the Lions will cover the spread as well. But yeah, I think it's just a high-powered offense. And crucially, they seem to be able to do really well and be very effective when they have injuries, which isn't the same for every team. So for me, they feel like arguably one of the most bulletproof offenses in the league, that whoever's on the field, they're still getting the job done. So yeah, I'll take the over on 43.5.
Yeah, Detroit Lions 16.5 on Matchbook for the Super Bowl currently. So yeah, maybe one to check out and keep an eye on over the course of the season. So Sam's locking in over 43.5, 188, and
what's
Lions
the NFC price?
I'll have to get that up there on screen, but
I feel like Lions against Chiefs is probably outside of 3 in the Super Bowl. I feel like Lions against any of the kind of the blue bloods in the AFC is probably going to be outside of a field goal. So I almost would lean more NFC if you want future exposure to the Lions.
Yeah, well, if they get to play the Chargers in the Super Bowl, I'm sure they'll go in as potential fouls. What do you reckon, Drew?
I don't know. Chargers are so used to playing on the road and or neutral site.
Well, on that topic, we'll get into another road game for the Chargers at home again. Cowboys at the Chargers, so there should be more Chargers fans, you would think, but evidently probably not. The way this season has gone so far for their home games, the Raiders took over there a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, Cowboys 179, Chargers underdogs 218. The point spread sees the Chargers get 3.5 head start at 1-6. The total is 51.0. It's Monday Night Football. The Chargers are on prime time. Very underappreciated side, the Chargers, Sam. And there's no bet for you, so just set up the game for us here. Look, Chargers coming off a bye against the Cowboys, who were quite poor last week as well. So I have high hopes for the Chargers to get a result here.
Yeah, this is just one of those games that this scares the life out of me. I'd probably say the Chargers should be a slightly shorter price than they are. But the thing is, this Cowboys offense is spluttering big time, but they still have that potential. And it kind of worries me with betting when you start talking about potential, because that's inevitably something that when you haven't seen it 5 weeks into the season, you start to wonder if that potential is really there or whether you've just totally misjudged kind of what they have in the locker room. But this is one of those games that if you told me, wake up, was it? It's Monday Night Football, isn't it?
Yep, Monday night.
Wake up Tuesday morning.
YouTube highlights. I'll be there, Sam.
But if I woke up Tuesday morning and I saw the Cowboys had won by 10 points, I wouldn't be surprised. If I woke up Tuesday morning, the Chargers had won by 10 points, I wouldn't be surprised. I really do feel like this is one of those games that I feel like whoever wins, it's going to be a substantial win. And Kellen Moore, I mean, he knows the Cowboys, doesn't he? We all know that. Austin Eckler should be back. And there's just too much here that, I don't know, I like the Chargers, but I'm just too scared to kind of get involved. Potentially an in-play look.
Okay, yeah. You're stopping the team's theme here, so I'll get to that. We'll start with you, Drew, on this and the Chargers. And look, Tuesday morning, for those not in the States, I may not appreciate this. We can't stay up to 5 a.m, unfortunately. So first thing I will do Tuesday morning is watch the brilliant NFL YouTube highlights package without any spoilers, fingers crossed. What's the result of this game? You really like the Chargers in this spot. I'm sensing on the money line here.
Yeah, I mean, really like is strong. I just think that if you're going to play the Chargers, you play them to win, because the Cowboys are front runners. If the Cowboys are playing well in a given game, then things tend to continue to go well for them, and vice versa. At least that's the signal we have of them through 5 weeks. And I think if you really want me to make a prediction, Tuesday morning you wake up and the entire narrative is Mike McCarthy's job safe. If he loses to the degree that he lost again in prime time, and this team is 3-3, when the expectations were so high, and actually expectations got raised because they just obliterated the first couple of teams they played.
Giants and Patriots.
Turns out those teams stink. People really kind of have let the ship sail in terms of how good they think the Cowboys are, and if they are 3-3 and have had 2 back-to-back embarrassing primetime losses, the heat under Mike McCarthy is going to be, at a 9 out of 10. And I would also kind of add a little bit of salt to the mood if Kellen Moore schemes up an offense that just toasts your defense, because this defense is toastable, it turns out. If you can neutralize the pass rush, then the middle of the field is super duper soft. And they lose Leighton Vander Esch, who I had a pretty low grade on anyway, so it doesn't super move the needle for me. But you can't necessarily backfill that with any type of notable talent. So the middle of the field looks soft, and the Chargers are coming in at reasonably full strength. I know Mike Williams is done for the season, but my guess is Austin Eckler is good to go here. My guess is that some of the players on defense who have been missing time are going to be good to go coming off the bye. I haven't heard anything about setbacks for Derwin James or Joey Bosa, so fingers crossed that they ultimately go. But when I look at the Cowboys team and the offense in particular, I see a team that tacked into a very kind of safe, low risk offense to start games. And if you're playing bad defenses, and you can get a lead that way and let your defense and special teams kind of help you pad your lead, and then you take some chances and run away with games. Like that's sort of been their formula in the 3 wins we've seen. I don't see that working against this Chargers team really at all. You need to be a lot more explosive. You need to have a lot more speed. They really only have, the CeeDee Lamb, who's making any kind of game-breaking plays right now, and his chemistry with Dak seems a hair off. Brandon Cooks looks like a whiff in terms of a signing. Michael Gallup can't create separation. Like there's just, and Tony Pollard is, looks like he's still recovering from the injuries sustained in last year's playoffs, which isn't crazy because that was like 8 months ago. So I think realistically, the Cowboys are in a little bit of a tough spot here. They're obviously at a huge rest disadvantage. They're at a huge travel disadvantage. They went back to Dallas from San Francisco instead of staying on the West Coast, where they have a training facility in Oxnard. I'm not sure at all what the decision making was there to travel these guys twice, but they did. And so I think this is about as bad a spot as you can ask for. In about as bad a time on the schedule as you can hope for it, because they head into their bye next week, and they come out of their bye with a couple more not easy wins to be had. And coming out of your bye, if you lose to the Rams and the Eagles, which right now I think is reasonable, then I think Mike McCarthy is your first coach fired.
Yeah, a few travel plans not quite making sense to me. And throughout the NFL. But Judah, over to you. If you want my prediction, it'll be a Brandon Staley bad call that will ruin my Tuesday morning. But take it away with your thoughts in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like I'm agreeing with Drew too much. It's
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Now all of a sudden, Drew and I are on all the same sides. I don't know what's happening.
Well, who copy and pasted first? So who selected the Chargers?
Exactly.
Decided to just copy and paste.
Fair point. That's a fair point. Yeah. Look, man, I'm just trying to get my McCarthy first coach fired ticket home. I got a fun stake on that at 30-1, by the way. I'm not joking.
Oh wow. Judah.
That would be great. But in all seriousness, I think Drew touched on a bunch of the kind of key elements here, which is that this Dallas defense their pass rush is absolutely ferocious. They're generating pressure on more than half their plays. But I think that's kind of mitigated by a quarterback in Justin Herbert, who avoids sacks at such a high clip, is so good when scrambling and avoiding pressure that I think he kind of can take advantage of the Cowboys defense. And on the flip side, I worry a lot about kind of how the Cowboys offense is structured. They have a huge, drop in their ability to force coverage and mistakes. And that is a key element to me when I'm looking at how well can you take advantage of a particular matchup. And I think the Chargers are definitely beatable. But if you're taking yourselves out of so many plays by virtue of your scheme, your lack of separation, all those things, you won't be able to kind of take advantage of the matchup as you would teams who kind of don't essentially shoot themselves in the foot through their scheme. All of these angles are leading me to kind of get on the Chargers bandwagon. And I think people are not necessarily sure how to price the Cowboys because they've kind of blown out these teams. I don't see this as a particularly great offense right now. They don't have the weaponry, and I want to back the Chargers. As we said, buys are particularly important when your players are healthy, and the Chargers had a bunch of huge injuries, and those guys all should be ready to go. I'm ready to back the Chargers on those two key matchup angles that I see as kind of being huge to determining this game.
Okay, Chargers underdogs here, but Drew and Judah are in agreement. 2.18 the price currently on the Moneyline Matchbook as we record on Wednesday. The game is obviously Monday night. And we'll get to our any other bet section. If you want a full recap of these bets coming up or any of the bets we've talked about, insights.matchbook.com. And as I said, we see a lot of good numbers going there, particularly Red Zone Sunday, to just recap the bet, see what the guys think. And of course, all podcasts here is timestamped below. So if you want to go to individual matches during the week, feel free to do so. We'll go to any other bets, and we'll start with you, Sam, because it just gives us a quick opportunity to talk about the 49ers, how impressive they are, and they are also, it's pointed to say, they're now clear Super Bowl favorites across the board. So the market was really impressed with the last primetime win over the Cowboys.
Yeah, they've been so good, and I think it was Judah kind of week one was singing their praises. I thought they'd start a bit slower than they have, and they've proven me totally wrong. Deserved favorites at the moment, but let's be honest, we are only heading into week 6. A lot can go wrong very, very quickly in this league. So I certainly wouldn't be rushing to put any money on them winning the Super Bowl, even though they do look like the best team by a margin right now. But for me, yeah, I'm taking the 49ers minus 5.5 at the Browns. Current line is 6. I want to stay slightly short of that, so I'm taking the 5.5. But there's been a lot of talk here about, dealing with this great Browns defense, and it is a great defense, but we saw what the Niners did against another supposedly great defense just last week, or the week before, sorry. That kind of gives me food for thought here. And with Deshaun Watson still, like, we are likely to see him play, but not entirely sure how kind of ready to play he's really going to be. I don't know. That just pushes this further and further towards the Niners for me. And obviously, Christian McCaffrey is their main offensive weapon, and the Browns have been incredible against running backs. Only 3 teams have given up less yardage on the ground than the Browns, but they have given up a lot more receiving yards to running backs than a lot of other teams. I think they're 10th in the list for that. So we know what McCaffrey can do in the passing game. I think he's had just under 5 targets per game this season. I think he's going to have a big game. I appreciate saying Christian McCaffrey's going to have a big game isn't exactly Pulitzer Prize winning stuff, but I think ultimately I'm just going to ride this Niners train now. I think almost every week, unless the line is ridiculous. I just think they're just too good, and they have the opportunity. So they have the ability to really kind of get away from teams once they have the lead. And I don't know if I really have much heart in a 90% fit Deshaun Watson chasing them down if they do get that lead. So yeah, I'm going to take the Niners minus 5.5 points.
Minus 5.5, currently 186 on Matchbook, and it's trending downwards as well. So that could end up opening, or it can end up closing maybe 6 up to 7 perhaps. Drew, heading over to you for an underplay here, under 46 in the Jags game.
Not a super strong angle here. I just think in general, Colts are getting back some important players in terms of health here. Jags traveling back from London. I think that's going to be more impactful on their offense and their defense. Their defense only spent 20 minutes on the field against the Buffalo Bills. That was a pretty lopsided time of possession in favor of the offense. That actually could impact the offense more, where you got some tired legs out there. And on the flip side, I think the Colts are going to run a very, very, very vanilla scheme here, considering the strength that we've seen from the Jags and their secondary in particular. So Colts leaning into the run, Jags having a little bit of a tired offense. Both of those things to me speak to an under, and I would expect that the fact that this is the second time these two teams have played this year in such close proximity, and that neither team really has any wrinkles or specific kind of game breakers or surprises that they can integrate, considering the situation, where they, what's happening with these teams. This just screams under for me. So under 46.
Okay, currently 188. Judah, over to you. It's Commanders money line at the Falcons, 2.28. So you're going with the dog here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Commanders. I think they're kind of a couple matchup angles, which are really driving this bet, I think, and some overreaction to last week too, I should add. But I think the Commanders are very, very beatable downfield. I don't think Desmond Ridder and the Falcons are going to kind of attack downfield, similar to what we saw the Bears do last week with great success. I don't think they have the personnel or capabilities to do that. And I think the strength of the Commanders defense is their defensive line. Desmond Ridder takes a ton of sacks. I expect them to really pressure Ridder and get to him a bunch, stalling out drives. And I think that the Commanders are more than happy and willing to kind of let Sam Howell rip it. And that's going to be a bit of an adventure week in and week out. But
you could say that again.
I do think that this is kind of the spot to attack the Falcons, who don't have the best defensive line. And I want to lead with the variance.
Yeah. I got to acknowledge my flag in the David Onyemata game last week was pathetic. I don't think hit the stat sheet until like late in the fourth quarter with some tackles. He was of no consequence in that game. But boy, oh boy, Judah, just fading Desmond Ridder at home. Are you crazy? All this guy does is win. But no, in seriousness though, I lean Falcons here just in the spirit of a little bit of disagreement.
Yeah.
Their safety group, those ball hawks against Sam Howell, and in general, the Falcons' run D outstanding. I think this makes the Commanders a little bit one-dimensional, and I think sets up for some takeaways, some short fields, and Falcons can kind of lean into who they want to be in terms of kind of run first. And I don't really know what to make of the Commanders defense, but their statistics so far against a meh schedule of opposing offenses is pretty concerning.
The podcast is on a good run of best long shots since we introduced it a couple of weeks ago. We had the Steelers, Jets, some of the underdogs last week. Sam, you are in agreement with Judah on the Commanders here, so you're a Sam Howell believer.
It's less I'm a Sam Howell believer, more that I am sick to death of Desmond Ridder conversation, to be honest, right now. I just logging into Twitter and just seeing.
You guys are a week early. They're going on the road next week. Unload all your Falcons hate in a week.
No, I don't like some of the stuff I've seen. The comparisons to Matt Ryan are just, the guy's a former NFL MVP. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous stuff I've seen on Twitter. All this talk about how great he is at home, and admittedly, the numbers kind of do back that up. But I do not trust these numbers whatsoever. I saw former head coach Mike Martz was saying how he's been pretty remarkable this year. What has he been watching? I don't know if he's senile. I have no idea what's going on. But he is not a good quarterback. I just do not believe it. He's had 10 turnover-worthy plays through 5 weeks. That's behind only Matt Jones, who's got 12. I do not trust him whatsoever. And whilst I don't overly trust the Commanders, I am more than happy to kind of put my money against Desmond Ridder for the foreseeable future. My other long shot is, I say long shots, these are basically 2 underdogs that aren't particularly huge underdogs, but the Texans, I'll take them on the money line against the Saints. I think, huge victory for the Saints, but I do think that potentially flatters them, and the market's maybe swung a bit too far that way. Because I think the Texans, whilst they did lose, obviously, I just think CJ Stroud has so much about him, and I really do like this team, and I'm happy to kind of maybe gamble that the market's gone too far, swinging towards the Saints, and I'm going to go the other way and take the Texans.
Yeah, we won't have a chance to talk with the Patriots this week, but we will hopefully have a further chances later in the season. We'll go to you, Judah. So this is a pick that I guess the guys will probably agree with in the long shots, but it's something the Lions, particularly Drew and yourself, we're big on the Lions, and you on the alternative spread, which is a good place, particularly if you want an small interest bet. 3.0 Lions minus 9.5 at the Bucs.
Yeah, I think I really want to be taking alternate spreads where I think that the offense can kind of separate and score a bunch of points, and the opposing team, the Bucs in this case, can't really score. And I think if my thesis is kind of right, that there's a huge mismatch of these teams and Baker Mayfield is bound to regress, that's the sort of spot where we end up with like a 31-14 or a 31-21 type of game. The Lions are going to score. We know that they have it's the second year of the Ben Johnson team where they've consistently been among the best offenses in football. There's nothing about the Bucs defense which is telling me that will kind of slow the Lions down. And I think kind of if the thesis is right, and if Baker Mayfield is in a lot of these kind of third and long situations, because they can't run the ball as it is, and I think the Lions have one of the better run defenses in football. And if he's taking a bunch of these sacks and, these 3rd and 10s lead to strip sacks and balls being forced in, and if kind of all of the pressure stuff regresses, I think this is exactly the type of game script which could lead to a Lions blowout. And I'll be on the 9.5.
Okay, my line's 9.5, and good advice attacking some alternative spreads when you have a strong opinion. Drew, you were quiet when we were talking about the Niners there. Look, in my untrained eye, I would probably be looking and leaning towards the Niners, maybe minus 5.5, minus 6. So why do you feel there is a smidgen of value, back in the Browns in the money line here?
I mean, I think if you want to take a high upside dog, it's Cleveland this week. You're getting a market adjusted price based on speculation that Watson's not going to go. He may play. I would put it at about 60-40 right now that he plays. I don't even really know that he matters a ton, because I would expect that Stefanski and co. Are crafting a relatively run-heavy scheme to take on this Niners defense. The Niners run defense, for what it's worth, is where you want to attack them. I don't think there's really any doubt about that. And if you can kind of lean into your identity and your best stuff in the running game, then I think you can actually be successful on the ground against this Niners defense. And then the flip side is, you have potential to make Brock Purdy look a little bit human here with your defensive line and their aggressiveness against an interior pass protection that has some question marks. I know Aaron Banks went down in the Cowboys game. He's going to play through it apparently, but he does have a shoulder injury, and you do have questionable guard play on the other side of the center. So I like the idea of lining Myles Garrett up in the middle here and really trying to disrupt Brock Purdy even earlier in his progression. He did show some very, very, very impressive play rolling out of the pocket and kind of throwing on the move last week. But a lot of that felt pretty well designed. And in general, I think this could be more chaotic. And then you kind of throw into the mix, this is probably the first bad weather game that Brock Purdy's going to have to deal with. There's a ton of questions to be answered. If he can be as effective throwing the football in breezy conditions, then we will learn about that on Sunday. So, there's enough chaos potential here that I think Browns money line at 3.4 is worth the small stake.
And Drew, we will, of course, perhaps if the 40% comes in, see PJ Walker, who was a podcast favorite last year. He was even in the YouTube comments at times. So perhaps he can lead the Browns to victory here against the Niners.
I don't have any read on what's going on with the Deshaun Watson situation, but I don't think it really factors as much into this handicap as the market is making it so far. And that's got to be frustrating for that organization overall. And PJ Walker might be a player that the team in the locker room rallies around. I don't know. He's here. I love it.
So Judah and Sam would have missed this, but PJ Walker was a regular YouTube commenter last year when he was playing for the Panthers. Great stuff. It was just when I saw the headlines this week, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, to be honest. But we got the best bets. The guys were 2-1, as we alluded to last week. So after a slow start, we're rallying the troops with some decent form. I have big confidence that we can get this show moving as we go on. Judah, we'll start with you. This is a game we talked about, or Drew talked about already, in the Jags against the Colts, and you like the -5.5 you're taking here on the spread.
Yeah, I don't think the Colts are going to be able to score on the Jaguars, quite frankly. This is a team that's relied on the run game in scoring. They're facing up against a really, really good Jaguars run defense. The Colts are averaging the fewest or the lowest separation of any team in the NFL. They don't have kind of the threat of Anthony Richardson running, which I think was elevating the rushing attack. The Jaguars have, Darius Williams has been a revelation on the outside for them. I think he'll do a good job. I think that we were talking as kind of differing from their results. And I think it's kind of come to fruition. This is a dominant Jaguars offense, I think. Just finding their footing, had everyone back healthy, and I expect them to put up points on the Colts.
Still, case sounded still pretty good to me, guys. In between that, Jags -5.5, 2.28. Drew, your best bet on the card, the Rams. And look, the Rams disappointed last week, but they have been really good against the Cardinals. Yeah. Cardinals, 197.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a best bet that wins as sweat-free as Judas Saints did last week. I just want one of these to be a sweat-free bet. So for that reason, I'm coming around to Judas Rams here. But the reasoning is pretty straightforward. So I didn't really say this out loud because you want to keep some stuff to yourself. But it was pretty apparent that the Rams' young team was suffering in the second half of games against Cincy, against Indy, and against and was hopeful against Philly last week, which is why best bet was Philly. And the reason was they traveled. You have a young team, doesn't really have the reps under their belt of how do you get right for a game after all of this travel and all of the the fatigue of an NFL season. The Rams' schedule to start was brutal. 3 of their first 4 on the road, trips back and forth from Cincy, short turnaround back to Indy, and then at home last week against the Eagles, they just had no juice in the second half. Well, now you get a full week to kind of rehabilitate and regroup, and I think that coming into this game against the Cardinals, you're going to have a peaking full-strength Rams team. The trio of weapons that they have in the passing game now with Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Tutu Atwell is extremely dangerous. Tough for me to find a threesome of receivers that is stronger and at better health, better fuller strength across the NFL right now. And I think that Rams are going to be able to basically do what we saw the Bengals do, but even more emphatically. And Cardinals, on the other hand, ton of shine is kind of off what Josh Dobbs is doing now. His offensive line play hasn't been as strong recently. Aaron Donald is just as good as we remember him being. He's just been less of a factor because he's been up against a couple of pretty good offensive lines, and this is not a good interior offensive line, and I would think he's going to be a disruptor here. This looks like one-way traffic Rams for me, and I think Rams probably in the case, in the discussion for punching a ticket to the playoffs this year if they can continue to perform at the level they do, and their schedule all of a sudden doesn't look that difficult.
Okay, Rams -7. Cardinals were on my hit list, let me down on a few multiples, so I hope that's true, Drew, that the Rams cover that spread for sure. Sam, Justin Jefferson is going to be out for a few weeks, but you are liking the Vikings -3.5 at the Bears, 2.22.
Yeah, absolutely. Vikings, they are 1-4. Justin Jefferson's heading to IR. Kirk Cousins a free agent next year. Their season is on the line at this point. If they lose one or two more games, you have to say that they're done. We're probably going to see a fire sale in Minnesota, start a rebuild. But for me, I'm taken back to a quote from, I think, like Rockefeller, saying that he tried to turn every disaster into an opportunity. And I look at this line, and I think this is a real opportunity. I don't care that Justin Jefferson isn't there. I'm going to use that as an opportunity to kind of get a bit of price kind of payback amid the uncertainty post Jay Jefferson. So we're going to see lots of Addison. We're going to see lots of Osborne. We're going to see a big game for Hawkinson, who's the Bears aren't particularly good against tight ends. Ultimately, this is a Vikings team who have had 281.6 passing yards per game. That's behind only the Dolphins, against a Bears team that have allowed 286 passing yards per game behind the Chargers. So it's a very good team with the air, very good team in the air versus a team who just simply can't defend that. And ultimately, as much as Jefferson is top 5 receiver in the league, I think that what they have there is good enough to get them over the line, especially in a game that is absolutely must win at this point. So Vikings -3.5. I'm happy to take that all day, every day.
Okay, Vikings -3.5, Jags -5.5 for Judah, and Rams -7 for Drew. Drew, one question from producer Ryan, incidentally a Dolphins fan. He is questioning if your quick thoughts on the MVP market. Brock Purdy favoring some spots. I'm looking at him as 5th favorite here and some books here. What are your thoughts on the MVP market?
I think his price needs to be in the top 3, surely, considering he's EPA per play, and his total EPA so far this season is just off the charts. Now, that's be very clear here. It is influenced by the fact that he is not turning the ball over. He has one fumble this entire season, 0 picks. That is not going to continue. Like he can continue to play amazingly well and continue to operate this offense at a very, very high level. And I think he's going to be in the discussion. But that some of that is going to come back to earth at some point. I will add that in general, his path to an MVP is a little bit more fragile because he has to basically go 15-2. Or 16-1. So he can really only have a couple of games where the team overall doesn't perform at a super high level because his anchor is not high enough to beat the likes of the Mahomeses or the Josh Allens of the world if he is, unless he is truly like 2 games clear of the field in terms of most team wins. But that at the same time, like I know I'm going against the Niners this week, like there are not many games on their schedule where I'm like, that looks like that might be a tough one. Oh, that might be a lot. Like they have a game against Philly that looks tough. And then the Jags game, but both teams are coming off buys. Like I really don't know exactly who on their schedule is going to be able to threaten these guys all that much. So, there'll be a couple of games where the team overall just sort of lets down, I would guess, and they'll take some losses. But the Niners right now are pretty clearly the best team in the NFL, and I think they're rated that way, or maybe a little bit. Maybe we're at a little bit of a local top for them. But if this team finishes 15-2 or 16-1, then Purdy is 100% in the MVP discussion, just like Jalen Hurts was last year. If you're the last undefeated team, the quarterback for that team is in the conversation. Period. Yeah. And so, I don't disagree at all that he is priced where he is, but I think Mahomes is still probably the bet. largely and if you're if Ryan is a Dolphins fan, like I'm against Tua in that market, but it's like kind of soft. And part of the reason I'm against Tua is like they've had 2 of the top 15 all-time performances already this season in Miami. And yet his EPA per play is not screaming at the top of the chart like he's way, way better than the rest of the field, right? Like he needed to have banked better statistics than he has, even though they're amazing. They needed to be more superlative than they are for him to be able to hold on for the rest of the season, because Dolphins have a tougher schedule. I don't know that they're really in line for the, they're going to need a little bit of luck to get the 1 seed, I think. And on the flip side, Mahomes is right in the discussion, and we have not even come close to seeing the best of the Chiefs offense so far. So I think, that's kind of my underlying read on the situation there. It's probably Mahomes to lose, but Purdy's in the conversation. Josh Allen's in the conversation. And for me, the next tier would be Tua and Jalen Hurts.
Okay, fascinating stuff as always from Drew. I think Brock's 10-0 as a regular season starter, so just shows it's been a phenomenal run. Let's see if they can keep it going. Current 4.9 favorites for the Super Bowl as we record, and we will review the Super Bowl prices maybe halfway through around week 9. But my thanks to Drew, Sam, and Judah. Went over the hour there again, but it's just so good to talk football with the guys as always. Insights.matchbook.com. Full recap around Red Zone. Well, we're checking out. Until then, we'll be back same time, same place, hopefully with a few winners. Best of luck if having a bet. Bye-bye.